Hi, I'm Mark Bernard, and I'm here with the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. And I'm your instructor on this program for the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. We're in the second module called Protect. This is the course, and the lesson is number 8. It's Awareness and Training, PR.AT. Within the reference model, you can find this lesson right here. And during the course of this lesson, we're going to take you from basic or no knowledge to where you understand what it is that NIST is trying to accomplish here. And hopefully you'll be able to use that in your job that you're working at today, or maybe a new job in the future. As you use these skills, you're going to be able to expand and do troubleshooting, perhaps even auditing after a few years of use. And then that might lead to being able to do architecture or design for a new NIST program within a different division, or perhaps when you're re-engineering this program to fit better into your organization, you'll have that knowledge. The goals for awareness training are: all users are informed and trained. Goal 1. Goal 2, privileged users understand their roles and responsibilities. Goal number 3, third-party stakeholders, suppliers, customers, partners understand their roles and responsibilities. Goal number 4, senior executives understand roles and responsibilities. And goal number 5, physical and cybersecurity personnel understand their roles and responsibilities. We've created some questions to help with the transfer of this knowledge, and the questions are as follows. When are employees informed and trained? How are privileged user roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? Who defines third-party stakeholder roles and responsibilities? Where are executive roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? What roles and responsibilities do physical and cybersecurity personnel have? That's 5 goals. Let's jump in. Awareness training. This is all about providing information to employees and management and even third parties, so that you can engage them and empower them in the process of your cybersecurity program. If you do a really good job, you'll be able to transfer some skills to them so that they'll be able to take on some of the frontline cybersecurity work, such as preventing social engineering or phishing attacks before they infect your organization and cause problems. When are employees informed and trained? That's our first question. Well, this is a chart that I use when I do my implementations, and you can see here there's a number of audiences that require different types of messages, whether it's awareness training or whether it's a strategic communication. We do design some for all, some training for all employees, some specifically for IT, others for the developers doing the development process. Security people do a different type of job than everybody else. Management, of course, have employees directly reporting to them that provide all of these skills, IT, development, security. So management needs a slightly different type of message. Then there's the governance committee and contractors and service providers. Now in these columns here, you can see this is normally what human resources takes on. So they have an induction or a new employee process, and when they come on, they should have some kind of training. You'll notice that all of these are called CAT 001. So I did that just generically across the board. I didn't want to get into too much detail. But anyway, so human resources provides new employee orientation or induction training. They should touch on the cybersecurity program and what are the requirements for the policies, procedures, and standards. There's also, there could also be online training. So if you have a large organization and you have a lot of people you need to talk to, and it's over multiple regions or geographies, you might want to consider recording your training and then sharing it with these different groups. Now this is the part here where the cybersecurity program team leads strategic communications and awareness training two different things with two different purposes. Today we're just talking about awareness training. These are the different channels that we communicate through. And the reason why there are so many channels is because this is really a lot about sharing knowledge and building up the level of awareness within your organization. Is really like an internal marketing strategy or plan, okay? And in order to, get your message through to the people that need to understand what the message is, marketers often say it takes 7 attempts to communicate the same message before finally it's heard. So with that in mind, we provide at least 7 different channels in order to provide the same message over and over again so that it doesn't get blocked and that people do understand it. So email, of course, is a very passive kind of way to communicate things to people. There are the executive or director meetings that we can share information through. We can also set up conference calls. We can have team meetings or scrums if you're in the agile world. You might have one every day. And if you have a scrum every day, then you might want to talk about what cybersecurity is doing and what's it all about. There's also the information security and compliance workshop. You might want to consider once a year having a workshop with people in order to help provide some new skills and also give them an opportunity to test out their skills and maybe even test them a little bit. The corporate website is a good place to post information. So again, this is like email. It's very passive. It's not direct. It's not in front of people where they can ask questions. Then there's stand-up meetings or scrums. So I mentioned over here you could have scrums with team meetings. Well, you could have a scrum here as well. So perhaps your team meeting is on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, but the scrum is likely held every morning or every other morning. So you could provide some information there. And then there's Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is, the tool that you're using for your online conferencing and videos that you might want to use to set up some meetings and some awareness training. So the thing is with awareness training is you want to have specific goals set, targets for knowledge transfer. You also want to make sure you keep good records, attendance records, who was invited, who actually attended. And then you want to do an evaluation, a follow-up to make sure that the knowledge was transferred. So it just can be a simple questionnaire, 3 to 5 questions. And you can ask things like, did you find the content understandable? Was the presenter doing a good job at explaining things? That type of stuff. So these are sort of quality management type questions because we want to continually improve the awareness process to make it better and better and better. But also we want to, on a sidebar, we want to evaluate the participants to make sure that they're getting what they need out of the process so that we don't have to keep repeating it. Okay, so that's the annual communication and awareness training plan. Awareness training needs to be planned, scheduled, designed for different employees, different roles. So we talked about the different audiences here. We talked about human resources role versus the cybersecurity team and about the different channels. We talked about planning ahead. Usually when I set up a program, we do this 1 year in advance. So we set out a calendar for all the events to happen throughout the year and get agreement by the governance committee so we can go ahead and execute it. Because the one thing, of course, about having these individual meetings is when we pull people away, if we can't combine what it is that we're doing with an existing process, then we're pulling people away from work that they should be doing. And senior management is not a big fan of that, so you need their support and an endorsement in order to make that happen. If they're on the governance committee, then surely they understand the importance. Okay, so what kind of roles are we talking about? We're talking about, we mentioned these up here, all employees, technology, development, security, middle management, senior management, governance committee, contractors, supply chain service providers. Of course, supply chain is a big topic throughout NIST as well as risk management. Okay, when are employees informed or trained? So learner's taxonomy and verb chart. So here's the different tiers of that we go through as human beings, how we absorb or adopt new knowledge. This has been proven over and over again. There's taxonomies out there like Bloom's taxonomy, for instance, that talks about the same kind of approach. So first of all, people need to be informed. These are verbs. This is a verb chart. So when you ask questions or when you're checking if people understand a level of knowledge. Like if you wanted to see if they understand what NIST is, just informed, but maybe not understand how it's applied, comprehension, you would use some of these verbs. Can you provide a list of, courses that you might need to take or assets that you need? Can you describe how governance is conducted? So it does imply that they would understand it. It's more than just being informed. It's a little bit of being understanding. That's comprehension. Level 2. Level 3 is application. So you might want to ask questions around this. How do you apply risk management in a cybersecurity environment? So they should be able to answer that. So that's application. You can ask them about troubleshooting, auditing, and architecture as well. So the verb chart helps. It's much bigger than this. This is just a small sample with just a few rows to give you an idea of what it looks like. Communication awareness training strategy for knowledge transfer is important. We will develop curriculum competency testing based on this taxonomy. So it's important to understand that we have a consistent approach to how we measure whether or not the cybersecurity message is getting through to the people who need to hear it. When are employees informed or trained? Initially, a wide range of knowledge is required to perform these jobs. So there's many different jobs. So a lot of the infrastructure jobs are very specialized. You have firewall people. You have infrastructure people perhaps that do everything. They might do firewalls, load balancers, switches, and other devices, servers that are in scope. The knowledge becomes more specialized as we progress along with each individual learning path. That's true. Because initially you start with a lot of theory, and then you start to apply it on the job, and all of a sudden you gain experience from that. And now you have sort of the technical skills and the experience to go with it within the organization. So your path expands and your knowledge rises up. Some of the examples of training that you might conduct: you might have induction training. You could have employee awareness training just to get people on the ball. So again, if you think about those different tiers that we just talked about, so maybe induction training is just to give them a sense of what it is that's expected from them. Employee awareness training might actually require more awareness, more understanding. Privileged user awareness training, we want to make sure that privileged users understand what their roles are, because they have important roles, because they can bypass a lot of the application access control and actually work directly with the servers and the other infrastructure devices. Awareness training for managers. So a lot of times we try to provide managers with answers to questions before the employees ask. So we use a curve. We understand what transformation is. Adopting a cybersecurity program is a big deal. The transformation that an organization can go through can be quite dramatic, because if they're really a loosey-goosey kind of organization where everything is very fun and free and open, and to an organization where they need a little bit more structure, it could be a bit of a learning curve. If it's a startup, the startup generally is very loose and open culture, not too formal. But of course, every startup grows up and becomes a big enterprise eventually if they're successful. And when they become an enterprise, then they require more control, more frameworks, more review, more audits. Things change. Startup grows up and becomes a different kind of organization. So providing managers with the information that they need to answer the questions of the employees when the employees come is very important. Making sure that they understand what the issue is with the employee, and then being able to give them the right answer is very, very important. So manager training is important. Governance committee, they don't need to be trained so much, but with the governance committee, they're going to help you make communications, because they have to communicate down to the people that directly report to them. But initially, you're going to have like a terms of reference that outlines what the governance committee does. So what the inputs are that you're going to be bringing as the cybersecurity leader or the chief information security officer, and then what you expect from them, the outputs. So that part you're going to have to talk about. That communication is going to be important. Contractor awareness training, of course, you know, I think that contractors should be treated like regular employees, even though they're not employees, but they should kind of get the same kind of messaging. Certainly contractors have access to the environment just like employees. They may be doing more specialized work, but at the same time, they need to be accountable. So you need to provide some kind of awareness training that kind of follows what employees have to go through, or privileged users maybe. Physical and environmental security. So this is all about, our facilities. We have sign-in logs. We have, access control, maybe photo IDs. There are different zones that you can go into because that's part of your job. There are some that you can't, so you shouldn't try. There's a lot of things. Environmental is about, keeping the machinery operating at the right temperature, making sure that there's no type of flooding or moisture in the rooms that can create problems with silicon chips and electricity. There's a lot of things to look at when you talk about physical and environmental. Policy, procedure, standards, and awareness training. This goes without saying. Personally, I think less is more. I think fewer policies are better than more. I've written policy documents that are 200 pages, and I've written them that are 3 pages. So it just depends again on the culture of the organization, what stage they are in their growth, and what they need to get the job done today. So, but employees need to know what the policies are and what they're meant to be used for and how they apply them. And they need to understand that there's procedures. So for more formal processes, for instance, with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, we're expected to have a high level of maturity in a short period of time, similar to PCI requirements. They want it up and running within a year, 2 max, right? 2 max. So 1 year ideally, but there's a high level of maturity required within the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. And in order for you to achieve that, then you have to realize that things are going to have to be documented. And we talked about it before. There's different types of information. So there's tacit knowledge that you have, and knowledge managers refer to this as the things that you know that you don't know. So they're kind of baked in genetically. It's kind of your smarts. It's how smart you are. And then there's implicit knowledge, where you might say, here's how you do this, okay? But you're not writing it down. You're not following any type of procedure or pattern. You're just basing it on your own experience and knowledge. And you're maybe directing somebody. Here's how you take care of doing backups. Here's how you write a piece of script for a login. Here's how you install or upgrade the firewall. So it could be implicit. But ideally, wherever there's a high level of criticality and you want to do some kind of a risk assessment to help define what are the critical processes to your organization, then you want to take that implicit knowledge and you want to convert it into explicit. And that means that it's now documented, so it can be followed. And also, the internal auditor can also check to see if the procedure is being followed, because that's one thing about undocumented procedures. People could do it 50 different ways. The outcome will probably not be consistent, which is unfortunate, but that's the way the quality management people look at it. They have a saying. They say what you're going to do and do what you say, right? Okay, so enough about that. But so you need to have some training around standards, procedures, and policies and what that means. Incident management, most definitely. One thing about NIST is it's all about identifying, protecting, identifying, responding, and recovering from incidents. Big, important. And you're going to see that in the next, the latter modules or courses that we do. Right now we're in Protect, but certainly in the next one, Detect, you're going to start to see some of that. Risk management, very, very important. There's like 3 streams of activities that NIST wants you to get on with. They have 4 tiers within those 3 streams. They want you, first of all, to adopt a risk management methodology and approach. And then they want you, so that's the first stream. The second stream is to integrate that. And then the third stream is to be able to share intelligence from your risk management activities. So when you find that there's threats attacking your organization, or there's vulnerabilities, or you've learned some type of intelligence about different attack patterns, they want you to share that. And they're willing to also share it with you. So it's a give and take kind of relationship. That's very important. So risk management is definitely the decision-making tool. And again, this could be a digital transformation thing. Perhaps people don't think in terms of risk. Perhaps they think in terms of tasks. I have to upgrade the firewall. I don't know what the impact will be if I don't do it. You know, they might be thinking like that, and so that needs to change, and that could be a culture shift a bit. So you definitely want to prep the managers and be prepared for the changes in questioning and in attitudes. Information handling, one of the most critical processes that you're going to teach the front office people, and it ties all the controls into a very smooth, slick, sophisticated procedure that you can teach to everybody. When you have this type of information, how do you evaluate what kind of classification it is, what kind of controls need to be applied to it. So it's that kind of training. It's very straightforward, and people usually grasp it very quickly, but very important. So you need to have some training around that. When are employees trained and informed? Okay, so then there's this beautiful roles and responsibilities chart. And you can see here where it lists all the different processes, the different modules within NIST. So I only have the first two here on the screen. Identify and protect, but then I list all the procedures that have to happen within here. And then over here, so these are the functions. And then over here you have a list of titles within your organization. So this will change, of course, to reflect your organization. You will update these. Usually the most important people here are on well, I shouldn't say that. Usually the people that have the most accountability, let's put it that way, are on the left-hand side, and toward the right, lesser and lesser, right? So, and these indicators, inform. So the board of directors doesn't necessarily make decisions about operations and security. They're definitely interested in what's going on there, so they want to hear something about it. But usually it's the chief executive officer or the chief information officer that might be important, responsible for that, or in this case it's the chief information security officer. The governance committee is also responsible for helping make decisions. Who needs to be consulted? Internal audit should be consulted, pardon me. Not insulted, consulted. And then there's different managers and probably down to SMEs, subject matter experts, that also need to be part of the process. So again, it's informed, consulted, responsible, and accountable. Okay. So this is a good chart. It's one chart. It's one page usually. And you can train people on this and ask questions around it so that they understand roles and responsibilities. Roles and responsibilities are summarized and easily communicated in one chart. That was my point. Okay. Now, question number 2. How are privileged user roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? Privileged users. So these are the users who can bypass the application controls. So these users have like root access or super access, or it depends on what system you have, or SecOff or authority. They have very high level authority. They can change things in the configuration. They're very accountable. They're very responsible people. So how do we tell them about their roles and responsibilities? They probably already know a lot of it, but we need to document it. So we need to make sure that privileged user roles and responsibilities are documented and communicated using job descriptions. I talked about job descriptions and the importance of this before. I'm thinking that a lot of job descriptions don't reflect the things that they need to, and they may need to be modified. So, and it's not because nobody understands it. Well, actually, it's pretty new. Cybersecurity is pretty new, so I think you need to work with HR and help them understand what needs to be documented so that it can be supported through the program. Privileged users have the authority to access and bypass change security controls. You're right. They can delete logs. They can change configurations. They can open the internet to your system. They can close it to your system. They can do a lot of things. They can transfer data around. They can manipulate data. Privileged user roles and responsibilities need to be audited. So that's the first thing you need to tell privileged users. And for some, they'll just say, sure, that makes sense. And others, they'll say, well, I don't really want to do that, but they don't have a choice. So you need to audit privileged user accounts. And the best thing you can tell them when you tell them if it's a culture shift for them, because they've never done it before, is you can tell them that you're doing it for their own good, for their own safety, because if something goes wrong, they want to be able to prove that it wasn't the user account that they have that created the problem. So you want to be able to narrow down the source of the problem. Privileged user accounts are very, very important. You hear a lot about ransomware attacks in the news. Ransomware attacks are created because someone's accepted a phishing scam. They've clicked on the link. The link has downloaded a Trojan, a ransomware Trojan, to their system. And now that, depending on who that user is and what their authority is, that Trojan has their authority now on the system. And that Trojan, the next thing it will do is it will be initiating the ransomware process to integrate, or pardon me, to encrypt data and send a message back to its home office. But it will be looking for a privileged user account to latch onto so that it can do that, because without a privileged user account, it can't change anything on the system. So this is another reason why we wanted to monitor and control privileged user accounts. There are many classes of privileged user accounts that we'll talk about on the next slide. The following privileged user accounts come from probably the most secure system that I've ever worked on. It's never been hacked yet, and it's been around for almost 30 years. It was known originally as the AS400, Application Systems 400. It's now known as the IBM System I. I believe I is for Internet. And it has a very, very good identity and access structure, including a lot of privileged accounts. So let's look at a few of these. So we have user class. The user class field identifies the roles of a user. So a front office person, for instance, who doesn't necessarily have to have read-write authority to the data, but what they do need to have is access to go into the data and maybe use it, run reports on it. SecOffer is the most powerful user account on System I. It has absolutely all authority. It's like super or root on Linux or Unix, respectively. SecAdmin is the next most powerful. It's a little bit reduced in its ability to manipulate the data. The System I is an object. The architecture of the operating system is object-oriented. So it's very different than any other architecture, and that's one of the reasons why it's never been hacked. It's because the system is smart enough, before it executes an object or a file, it will actually read what the file does, and then it will execute it or not, depending on what it does. The programmer. So program authority, again, is for people who do coding and development. So they don't have root access or super or SecOffer. They have limited access that they need to do their programming. Then there's the operator, and you know what operators do? They monitor the system to see if there's problems, and then they do backups and they take care of business. And then there's a regular user. So regular user is very, is again a front office type of authority. So when you create a user account for yourself, it has a parameter within the user account, and the user account is quite large actually. So the file is probably about 4 pages long, and there's one section where you define what the special authorities are. Okay, who defines third-party stakeholder roles and responsibilities? Third-party roles and responsibilities are documented within contracts. So this is at a very high level. So within a contract, they'll say, here's what we're going to do for you as part of our agreement, right? But they don't talk about what we call the backdoors or the utility access accounts. For that, you need to study the application. You need to ask questions. You need to find out what are the user accounts that are generic to the process. Almost always there's going to be a few, and I mentioned a couple privileged user accounts like root and super and SecOffer that are a few for the operating system, right? But for the applications, they also have similar types of backdoors. And you want to find out what they are, because you can bet that the hackers have the manuals, and if they find out what kind of system you're running, they're going to be reading the manual and finding out what kind of authority you have and what kind of access you have to see how they can manipulate your system. Example of third-party roles and responsibilities. Well, a vendor sells the hardware or software products like servers, laptops, network gear, cables, Microsoft, e-business suite, SAP, R3, examples of IBM, HP, Oracle, etc. So the vendor sells these applications to you, but in order for them to maintain the systems, to do patching and stuff, they need to have one profile who has the authority to basically to back up those applications and to overwrite them and replace them with new patches. In some systems, they add layers of patches, and then after they get to a certain volume of layers, they create a brand new version of the operating system. In other systems, they create a privileged user account that can make they can make these changes to a system remotely. So they may have some type of remote access through an IP. So you need to find out about these things if you're responsible for security. Find out all the different user accounts that can be added or taken away. Provide service providers sell services like internet access, VoIP, cabling, air conditioning, system integration at retail price with overhead. Examples: IBM, EDS, etc. So these are service providers. So we're talking about the difference now between service providers and vendors. So a vendor actually sells you a piece of equipment. A service provider sells you a service to go along with that equipment. Integrated service provider provides skills and expertise. They'll provide the people that you need to implement the system and to get it up and running. Independent contractor usually is an expert in a number of different areas, and they can come in and provide what we call a staff augmentation. And that means that they come in and they play a role like your employees, but they're more specialized, and they can help you with a number of different areas within your organization. Next question. Where are executive roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? Executive roles and responsibilities are assigned by the Chief Executive Officer and maybe the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors generally hires the CEO to run the company. So they pick them, and then the CEO picks his executive team. So there may be a lot of executives already in place when the CEO gets hired, or maybe he's bringing in some special people. If it's a startup, then they've probably all been together from the beginning. Executive roles and responsibilities for cybersecurity are normally documented and communicated in the organizational chart. So if you look at the org chart for the organization, that's a good place to find them. Also, if you are like me and you create a terms of reference that talks about what are the expectations for the governance committee, which is usually made up. The governance committee members are usually the executives who are responsible for different parts of the organization because they have the authority for budgets and for resources. And if there's a problem with cybersecurity that involves their area, they're the people who can get it fixed because they want to know about the risk. They want to know about the gaps and exposures because they have the fiduciary responsibility. That means that they have a legal obligation. Anybody who's a director and above has a legal obligation. They can be fined by regulators, or they can even be put in jail, which is kind of bad for them. So they usually take great care in making sure that whatever it is that they're responsible for is taken care of. So executives know what their responsibilities are generally, but you'll have to coach them a little bit when it comes to cybersecurity. So again, there's a CEO. He makes or she makes the decisions on who's on the executive team. Some of the people that might report to the CEO are the Chief Operations Officer, who's kind of like the parallel. The CEO usually is like CEO and President / President. So they do the external facing part of the business. They deal with that part. And then the internal responsibilities for a CEO are often handed off to or delegated to the Chief Operations Officer, who takes care of the operation and makes sure that everything's running smooth internally. And then, of course, there's the CFO, very important role. Chief Financial Officer, make sure that the books are balanced and that there's no questions. And also works very closely with the budgeting process to make sure that the budgets are allocated properly. Chief Protection Officer or Chief Privacy Officer could be a person who's responsible for making sure that the organization complies with the GDPR or other privacy legislations such as FOIPA or PIPEDA. And then there's the CIO. There may also be a CTO. So the Chief Information Officer or the Chief Technology Officer are responsible for their respective areas. What roles and responsibilities do physical and cybersecurity personnel have? So physical is very different. Physical security personnel responsibilities include things like employees, guards, visitors, external service providers, vendor agents, facilities, external secure structure, processes, external security systems, so like CCTV or access control. A lot of contractors and stuff are involved with the physical security, as well as everybody else. Because physical security, if you're an on-site personnel, then you're a physical security personnel. You're involved with physical security. Internal structure, processes, internal security systems are what the cybersecurity people are responsible for. So they're also responsible for contingency planning, decommissioning of assets, handling of product and materials, production equipment, components, lost or stolen assets, packaging and delivery requirements. And some of these may also be transferred over to physical security. So there's a number of things cybersecurity and physical security do. They work together very closely. Cybersecurity, of course, is going to be more focused on the logical aspects, where there's the data, what are the processes, what are the controls. But there's an overlap definitely with physical security, because so many breaches are now happening through vulnerabilities and what we call the Internet of Things. So you may have an air conditioning unit that gets hacked, such as the one at Home Depot. And once they got into that network, so again, we talked about backdoors. So a vendor installs a heating, air conditioning system on the roof. They patch in a line, a telecom line. I guess nobody knew about it. They didn't ask about it. But they used that line in order to collect data from the system, which is normal. They wanted to know when the system was faulting or when there were issues with it. They probably also wanted to do some maintenance through that line, okay? But they didn't realize that they were connected into the infrastructure by connecting to that telecom line. And the worst part is that a lot of these vendors don't have mature or proper access control. So a lot of times it's just an IP you log into, you get a command line, and then you can enter commands on the command line, which is not good. And that's how this Home Depot system got hacked. So they got from the air conditioning unit into the point of sale system, all right, and created some big problems, stole a bunch of credit card numbers. So it's very creative, ingenious from the hacker standpoint, but a big problem and proof that there is a big overlap between physical security and cybersecurity, and we need to work together as a team, as one team. So we have some practices that we want you to go through, and this helps to build your skill level up, because what we just did is we talked about a lot about the theory behind cybersecurity. I gave you a lot of great examples how it can be applied when it comes to awareness training and some of the considerations for that. And but now we want you to practice a little bit so that you get your hands on it, and that will help with building your skills. So what I'd like you to do is, the first step is to identify the target audiences for a communication and awareness training program. Now, I gave you a great example of a communication annual plan. Pardon me. I'm losing my voice. So you could use that. You could certainly use that if that's the type of template that you want to go with. So identify the target audiences. Create a list of communication awareness training topics. Okay, draft materials and schedule communication and awareness training delivery channels. We didn't get too much into the actual drafting of that because this is really about getting you familiar with the processes and giving you some tools to use. If you have a communications officer or a marketing team, you might want to talk to them. The communications officer, of course, is responsible for any external communications for your company. Marketing team is kind of similar. They have a different responsibility, but they definitely know what they can do, what's within the boundaries and scope of the organization. And they're also very good at crafting good communication. So they're an excellent resource to draw on if you can do that. Talk to the marketing people. Very good. Conduct follow-up assessments to measure the level of knowledge transfer. So we gave you the 6-scale system, if you remember. So we went from, initial to understanding to application and so on and so forth, much like we're doing with each of these lessons. So depending on how quickly you want your organization to adopt NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or where you are today, so where your current profile is today, then you might be able to extend that further. But you want to come up with a plan to move it forward a little bit and show that you're making some progress on that. In order to do that, you need to be able to measure it. So if you use that verb chart that I provided, you can craft some questions in your surveys or your lesson plan evaluations that will help you to guide that process as you go through it. And you can measure it. So on an annual basis, you can measure how much progress you make over 1 year, for instance, or maybe over 2 years. You can keep bumping it up and bumping it up and bumping it up. I think you want to get it up to a level, my suggestion is you want to get up to a level where employees are empowered to make decisions. So a lot of cybersecurity threats, only a few might be targeting us, but we want to make sure that the employees understand what they are and how to stop them at the front. So phishing obviously is a big one. Phishing is being used. It's a social engineering tactic. So you want to teach them about social engineering probably. And a subcomponent of that would be focused on phishing. And so that they have a broad understanding and they know what to deal with if they see that type of activity. So you got to follow up and measure progress. And then 5, use the feedback to make improvements to the materials and delivery. So continual improvement, quality management is a big part of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. You'll see in the latter modules, there's a lot on communication and about feedback loops, and we're going to talk about that. And finally, report the progress to the governance committee. They want to see that the investment that they're making and the people that they have in charge of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework know what they're doing and are moving this forward. Okay, first question. Now, this is the third part of knowledge transfer. So we've provided a bunch of information, a lot of good information on how to implement awareness training. And we've given you an assignment. And now once you finish the assignment, now we're going to do a little test to see how much you remember. So when are employees informed and trained? During HR induction, that's one time, yes. During employment, yes. As they get employed and they continue to be employed, we're going to continue to educate them and trying to raise their awareness up and make empower them and engage them. Very key words there, empowerment and engagement. You don't want to disengage them. You don't want to turn them off. So you have to be careful not to push your program too hard, too fast, and make sure that you're going in a good direction. Because certainly if you lose your employees, you're going to have to bring them back in. Into the program, and you need to figure out how to do that in a positive approach that empowers them, because if they feel empowered, then they'll be engaged and you'll have a very successful program. So during induction, during employment, good. Second question, how are privileged user roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? Well, they could be documented during interviews, definitely. And that's when you should introduce people to the job descriptions. Actually, when you do the posting, I think that's the next one, yes. When you do the posting and you're looking for people to come and work for you, that's when you should actually have the job description or the requirements. So the mandatories, the optional skills, nice to have. You should have those listed there so that they understand. So the expectations are already set immediately before they even apply, right? So that they understand. Now, they might not have the details of what they need to have access to because that's kind of confidential. But you could have the high-level version of it for the job posting. And then once they come into the job and they get hired, then you can say, okay, here's what you need to have access to. And this could all be recorded within your access control system or your identity and access management system if you've done it right. All this information should be there so that you know. And try to avoid the situation where I see a lot happening where they say, Bill's coming in, he's taking over, he's going to have a job like Sally. Can you just copy Sally's account and call it Bill? Okay? Because that can create a lot of problems. So Bill might not need the same access as Sally, but because Sally's been with the company for 20 years, she has a lot of access, right? Her access has built up over many years as her responsibilities have grown and changed. And all of a sudden you're giving it to the new guy that walks in the door, which is not a good security approach. Okay. Annual awareness training. You could do annual awareness training exercises with the staff. That would be good. And you could, again, document it in job descriptions. Has to be in the job descriptions somewhere, somehow. Question number 3. Who defines third-party stakeholder roles and responsibilities? The service manager. So usually there's a manager in your organization that has initiated the process to get some kind of a service management group in to help them out. And so they know why they're there. They know what they're supposed to be doing. So they've documented what the roles and responsibilities are, or they have a good idea, and maybe they need some help documenting it. So that's one of the things as a cybersecurity leader that we need to follow up on is with the procurement people, making sure that the contracts define what it is that the vendors and suppliers are going to be providing. We talked about supply chain management at the end of our first module. And we want to make sure that they understand and it's well documented, because if you tell them up front before the contract's signed, they'll agree to it easily. But if you tell them after the contract has been signed, they're probably going to say, no, that wasn't agreed to. So that will be a problem for you, especially if it's a long-term contract. It may be difficult to get out of. So you want to do it up front. It's just like everything else with security. You want to get involved, engaged in at the front end of the life cycle process in order to make sure that cybersecurity has been addressed. So the service manager knows what third-party stakeholders' roles and responsibilities should be. The legal team will probably know because of the contracts. Within the request for proposals, the RFPs, it should be documented. And the procurement officers should know as well. So there's a group of people here that are involved in the front-end process of all agreements and contracts, and the procurement exercise and also the contract exercise that needs to have these things baked into the beginning. Question number 4. Where are executives' roles and responsibilities documented and communicated? Probably in their job descriptions, because yes, executives have job descriptions. You might not know what it is, but certainly the chief executive officer knows what it is, and probably HR as well. So you can talk to them about that. The terms of reference document. This is the document that I use to describe what the governance committee's responsibilities are going to be. And this document, I actually usually have the president or the chief executive officer sign it. And then we communicate it out to the executive team after it's been agreed to and signed. And that becomes an important document because that's a key governance document for your program. It tells everything that's going to go on when it comes to providing information to the governance committee and what you expect their decisions to be. So it's very, very important. Organizational charts document roles and responsibilities to a degree. They say, who is reporting to who is accountable to who. And generally, if you know what the department is, you know what their activities are. But it won't be as good as the job descriptions. The job descriptions have a lot more detail in it. CEO communicates responsibilities. The CEO or president can change responsibilities at any time, right? It's their business. They're running the operation. So people have to listen and pay attention. As I mentioned, human resource also knows. Question number 5. What roles and responsibilities do physical and cybersecurity personnel have? They have to make sure that visitors are checked in, that we know who's on site and where they are and who's responsible for them, right? We need to know about the facilities. We need to know about the environmental, water, air conditioning, electricity, all the basic stuff, plus the physical parameter, plus any kind of security issues. Maybe we have a loading dock. Maybe we have trucks rolling in and out of there. There's a lot of things you have to check into. Investigations into lost or stolen assets may be done by the physical security people. They may involve the law enforcement to come in and check, do investigations. Internal security systems, they probably have a good handle on that. So when it comes to access control or closed circuit television, CCTV, that's something that might be documented and managed by the physical security team. Certainly it should be integrated within the security information event management system. A lot of the physical sensors, controls for moisture and fire and heat and power and CCTV and access control should all be integrated into the SIEM to give the security analysts the whole picture when they're dealing with a breach or a cybersecurity incident. Okay, so this is the end of our lesson. Our progress chart is like this. So we've completed all the first course called Identify. We're working now on the second course, Protect, and we just completed the first lesson, and we have 5 more. So I want to thank you for your, pardon me, we just finished 2 of this course, and we have 4 more, which is great news. It's even better than 5. So what can I say? I want to thank you all for attending the lesson, and I hope that you're enjoying the NIST Cybersecurity Framework program. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a great day, and I will see you in lesson 9. Thank you.